you made it clear that there'll be 80,000 Pfizer jabs per week in the first few weeks. Would you like to see that sort of rate continue throughout the contract period?
We want to see two things. One is continuous provision of all of our vaccines. That's been a very important part of our discussions. There have been significant disruptions in some other countries, which has been the source of the global stories, that they've had supply chain disruptions. Therefore, they've had either to slow their rollout or, in some cases, pause it. We're very focused on continuous supply and then progressively expanding supply.
OK, but that number is right, isn't it? 80,000 Pfizer jabs for the first few weeks.
The expectation is that we'll receive 80,000 Pfizer doses in Australia for the first few weeks. They'll provide guidance in the middle of the month, the middle of this month, on the next round. But all up, what we've done today is secure an additional 10 million doses. We've doubled our volumes to 20 million. We had built in quietly into our contract an option for a further 10 million doses.
So that's half the population now that will receive that dose?
Up to 10 million people. And again...
Because under 16s are not getting it. So
correct.
That's roughly sort of half the population.
Yeah, but we actually have enough with 150 million doses for 3 rounds of vaccine for every member of the population. Now, obviously, we won't need that, but we've prepared for all contingencies. We've followed the medical advice, and the purchasing of vaccines is exclusively based on the advice of Professor Brendan Murphy's Scientific and Industry Technical Advisory Group.
And so further purchases are likely?
Look, I won't make any forward projections on this, because at this stage, all the advice we've received has been actioned. There's continuous review. But right now, we have the full amount that's been recommended. There's continuous review, but we're in an incredibly strong situation.
In simple terms, you know, there's been... Everyone's an expert at the moment when it comes to vaccines and this sort of thing, but can you clear up for us, if someone's getting the AstraZeneca vaccine and not the Pfizer vaccine, are they getting the second best option?
No, and this is actually quite a dangerous commentary that some who...
That's why I want you to clear it
up. No, they're both highly effective. Professor Brendan Murphy said that today, and I will actually do something unusual and quote from the Australian Academy of Science, where they said that Australia's become a pandemic success story. Australians can be confident that vaccines approved for use by the TGA, or the Therapeutic Goods Administration, will be safe and effective. Both the AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines are equally effective. Accordingly, the Academy supports the current Australian government vaccination strategy.
So are they equally as effective, though? Because the numbers that we see coming out of the UK and elsewhere is that there's 90% effective Pfizer, not as effective. Is that wrong?
No, that's completely wrong.
OK, that's good.
Completely wrong. And I want to knock that down. There's been irresponsible talk in the media. In fact, the heading in the Academy of Science release was Academy Statement on the Pandemic Vaccines and Misinformation. In terms of effectiveness for the principal goal of dealing with serious illness or hospitalisation, it's up to 100% effective for both. Now, in terms of if somebody were to have a minor symptom, on the early advice there was some difference. It's expected that on the advice coming out of the UK is continuing to see better and better results. So Brendan Murphy was at pains today to say that. And what we have seen is some early claims from people who wanted to challenge the medical advice. Remember, we're hearing from everybody, follow the medical advice. Many of those same people then say, but I've got a different view. The medical advice is crystal clear that for the central task of preventing serious illness and hospitalisations, it's expected that they will be equally effective.
The regulators in Belgium, Germany, Poland, a number of European countries are saying that they won't give the AstraZeneca jab to those over... Well, for Belgium, it's over 55. Germany, no one over 65. Poland, no one over 60 at this stage. What's that about?
Well, my understanding is that that's in terms of the data that's available. none of them have raised any question about the safety or the effectiveness, simply about whether or not additional data is required, because primarily the early clinical trials began with younger people. However, there's real-world data from mass inoculation in the United Kingdom, and those results have been published by Oxford University. They are preliminary. I think they have to wait to be peer-reviewed, but those results coming out of the UK in the real world are appearing to be increasingly strong, as Professor Brendan Murphy said today in the Prime Minister's National Press Conference.
So it's not your plan and the government's plan to say, OK, let's give the Pfizer to those aged over 65 and then the other...
No, our plan will be to follow what the TGA says. One of the things...
And that's not part of their thinking?
The TGA will make their recommendation and we'll follow it.
Okay.
They're expected to provide advice by early March. Okay. One of the things that I think we all need to stop and say is, where in the past have we ever tried, as non-experts, to say which vaccines should be prescribed under the National Immunisation Program for flu? Now we're seeing media commentators. Frankly, one program last night ran an economist who was giving his personal advice. A major national program ran an economist having been critical of some other people for giving their views. And so I would say to everybody respectfully but clearly, if you are asking everybody to follow the medical advice, which is what we have done scrupulously on the selection of vaccines, please practice that same approach yourself. And we saw some phony debate on this in early January. The Academy of Science, we saw the Institute of Virologists, we saw the Respiratory Disease Society, the Respiratory Disease College. We saw Professor Peter Doherty, the Nobel laureate, come out and all say this is about a program where that we have equally safe and for serious disease and for prevention of hospitalisation, equally effective vaccine.